God, we ask that it is you that we hear and feel in these words and in this place. Amen. I just want to point out this one line. Their abundant joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. How often do we pair those two things, abundant joy and extreme poverty? Never? I heard someone say never. Exactly. That just jumped out to me so much this time. Abundant joy and extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. For the first 3 years of Tara's and my marriage, we lived in a 300 square foot apartment. I was learning about living wages and stuff at grad school and in the class. They're breaking down how much you need to make as a single person, as a couple, as people with children, where you fall on the poverty line. And it was in that class that I realized, and I never would have known this without it, that I realized that Tara and I were living under the poverty line. And yet we were also having the most fun we probably ever had in our life while we were there. So I can experience this somewhat, that you can have abundant joy in extreme poverty, I think, if your heart is in the right place, which is what's going on with the church in Macedonia. And it just jumped out to me because we never, ever pair those two. And yet Paul's praising this church because of that. One evening, an old Cherokee told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside of people. And he said to him, "My son, the battle is between two wolves. One wolf is good and the other is one wolf is evil. It is anger and envy, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, lies, false pride, and ego, and the other is good. It is joy, peace, love, hope, kindness, truth, compassion, faith, and generosity." The grandson, hearing this, thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf wins? If this is a battle, which one wins?" And his grandfather replied, "The one you feed the most." I like this story because too often in Christianity we like to use a scapegoat for evil. We like to think that it's an outside force. That everything that's good can come from us internally, but evil is something else outside. But here in this Cherokee story, we hear how they both dwell within us, both the good and the evil. Jesus has a very similar moment with his disciples. They're standing outside of the temple, and everyone's coming in to pay their alms. They're all giving. And the first people showing up are very wealthy. And there's one in particular, very wealthy clothing. And he made a big show of giving. And it was hard not to notice how much the rich man gave. Have you ever seen someone do this in church? They wait till everyone's looking before they put their check in. I've talked to pastor friends of mine who say that at their church, they're expected to be seen putting money into the plate, and I think that's ridiculous. Right? Some people just make a big show about it. And it was hard not to notice this rich man making this big show, and then a short while later, a little bent-over lady came, and she was so small in stature, and she came up to the plate, and she just gave her a few coppers, and she slowly moved on, no show. And she did it in a manner that seemed like she didn't even want to be seen, almost like she was ashamed of what she had to give. And Jesus, in this moment, he watches his disciples and notices that they, like many of the others, assumed that the rich man gave much more because he could afford much more. And Jesus told them that this widow was much more generous than the rich man, for the rich man gave out of plenty, but she gave all that she had. The church in Corinth has been having troubles. We've been seeing this for the last several weeks. That's why Paul is writing to them. They've been having a number of troubles. They forgot to be a consoling community. Do we remember what it means to be consoling? What does it mean? Comforting. Yeah, they forgot to be a comforting community. They forgot to be forgiving. That's easy for all of us to forget. They forgot to be forgiving. They forgot to be mission-minded. They forgot to be faithful. They forgot to be a reconciling community. Basically, they forgot to put Christ at their center, and they got caught up in all the other stuff of life. Pretty much the church in Corinth is just like the church today. We too often forget to make sure Christ is at the center of all we do, because if we did, we'd be more like the church in Macedonia. that Paul praises in our scripture today. I was talking to some members at another church, and they were explaining some issues that they're having at their church and how their meetings are going, and I asked them if they pray in their meetings, and they looked at me like, no, why would we do that? Right? We probably all know churches like that. Churches very easily forget what we're supposed to be about. We get caught up in all that other stuff, and we forget to put Christ at our center. And so Paul, in his writing to the Corinthians today, praises another church who's doing the right thing. And he says about the church of Macedonia this: brothers and sisters, we want to let you know about the grace of God that was given to the churches of Macedonia. While they were being tested by many problems, their extra amount of happiness and their extreme poverty, is that fair, resulted in a surplus of rich generosity. I assure you that they gave what they gave. I assure you that they gave what they could afford and even more than they could afford. And they did it voluntarily. They urgently begged us for the privilege of sharing in this service for the saints. They begged for the privilege of giving beyond what they could afford. They even exceeded our expectations because they gave themselves to the Lord first and to us, consistent with God's will. I went to a program on stewardship and how to get your church to give more money. That was really the goal of this program. And the guy told this really good story there. He said that there was once a king who wanted to throw a very large party for his kingdom. And of course, if they're going to have a big party for a big kingdom, the king needed to have the very best wine for everybody. But he didn't have enough on his own, and he didn't want to burden the kingdom with extra taxes just so they could have really good wine. And so he said, this will be the price of admission. Every family coming needs to bring their very best bottle of wine to this party. And that they would mix it all up in this great big vat, and then they would have this amazing, awesome wine for everybody. So every person from the kingdom came, and they all brought their bottles, and as everyone entered the party, their bottles were dumped into this very large vat. And eventually the time came, and the king came forward, and he reached his goblet down into the vat, and he pulled up a cup of wine to start the party. And when he took a drink, he was shocked. It was just a glass of water. Everyone brought a bottle of water, thinking that no one would notice if they didn't give their best. They didn't need to give their best wine because everybody else was. No one's going to notice a single bottle of water mixed in. Henry Taylor, who was a politician in Northern Ireland at the turn of the 20th century, said something very profound. He said, "He who gives what he would as readily throw away gives without generosity. For the essence of generosity is in self-sacrifice." I was reminded of this quote this morning as I pulled up to the church and saw that somebody had dumped off a set of box springs by our door. Right? He who gives what he would as readily throw away gives without generosity. For the essence of generosity is in self-sacrifice. To be a Christ-centered community, we must be generous because Jesus gave everything. He was generous in his time, in his teachings, in his life, in his suffering, in his love, in his grace, and more. Jesus gave his all. There was nothing left to give. We need to be reminded that giving is a privilege. I'm sure you feel like that every time offering comes around, right? Or every time there's a sign-up sheet to help with something, you're just, oh, yes, I love that I get this chance to do this. We need to be reminded that giving is a privilege. Giving is an awesome opportunity to share what God has blessed us with. And there are many here who are really generous. I can't name you all, but I want to point out a few who are super generous. Barb Baker and Todd Remark are being so generous with their time right now to be able to step up and take over the storehouse of blessings. And we've had so many wonderful and generous volunteers in the past. Daryl has helped out so much and been so generous with his time in helping out. We've had a number of other volunteers, Dick Johnson, who gives so much in helping out. Sue Keir, Lucy Mead, Linda Remark, and Phyllis Hale are generous with their time, their prayers, and their patience as they serve as the officers of our congregation. I know that some of you are generous with your wallets, but there's a difference between giving a large sum and giving generously. One day, a beggar by the roadside asked for alms from Alexander the Great. As he passed by, the man was poor and wretched, and he had no claim upon the ruler except that he was close enough for him to hear him. And so the emperor heard him, and he threw him several gold coins. And a courtier was astonished at his generosity and commented, "Sir, copper coins would adequately meet a beggar's need. Why give him gold?" And Alexander responded, "Copper coins would suit the beggar's need, but gold coins suit Alexander's giving." Paul writes, "Be the best in this work of grace in the same way that you are the best in everything, such as faith, speech, knowledge, total commitment, and the love we inspired in you. I'm not giving you an order, but by mentioning the commitment of others, I'm trying to prove the authenticity of your love also. You know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ. Although he was rich, he became poor for our sakes, so that you could become rich through his poverty." I'm being very generous in stories this morning because there's so many that came to me in writing this, so I'm going to share another with you. There's a story of a farmer who is taking a full sack of corn to sell it in town, and on the way there he sees a king ride by in his fancy golden chariot, and the farmer flagged him down and stopped him and said, "Dear king, you give me so much through your benevolence and generosity. I wish there was something I could give to you." So the king looked him over and said, "Well, you can give me all of your corn." "Oh, I can't do that. I need to sell this corn in the market to provide for my family. But I can give you 5 kernels of corn." "All right," said the king, "I'll take 5 kernels of corn from you as a gift." And so the farmer gave the king 5 kernels and then finished the trip into town. And when he got to the market, he opened his sack to start selling his corn, and he found that 5 of his kernels had turned to gold. And he wept, realizing that if he had given more would have been given to him in return. The more generous we give, the more we are blessed. That's a truth of Scripture, but it's also a truth that gets twisted a lot by preachers and by churches, because it's not meaning blessed with material gains. It's not, if I give more, God's going to bless me with a magical random check in the mail. You can hear that from some pastors. That's not in Scripture. It's not being blessed with material gains, but with service opportunities. Chances to share God's story. Opportunities to serve. Blessed with new and deeper relationships. When we are generous, God opens our eyes to more ways in which we can be more generous. It's kind of like before you have children, you think there's no way you will ever have time for kids. I'm sure many of you had this conversation before you had kids. Too selfish. There's no way I'll ever have time for all these kids. And then when you have them, you find time to put them first, and everything else still falls into place. Paul writes, "I'm giving you my opinion about this. It's to your advantage to do this, since you not only started to do it last year, but you wanted to do it too. Now finish the job, as well as so that you finish it with as much enthusiasm as you started, given what you can afford. A gift is appreciated because of what a person can afford, not because of what the person can't afford. If it's apparent that it's done willingly. It isn't what we want others to have financial ease and you financial difficulties, but it's a matter of equality. At the present moment, your surplus can fill their deficit, so that in the future, their surplus can fill your deficit. In this way, there is equality. As it is written, the one who gathered more didn't have too much, and the one who gathered less didn't have too little." Generosity is really about equality. Not in economic status, but in opportunity. Not everyone will gather the same amount in Paul's example, but everyone gets the chance to gather, so that they can take care of one another. We live in a country where we say that everyone gets equal opportunity, right? But you can't honestly tell me that a child born on the southeast side and one born to a family just 10 minutes north in Jackson will have the same opportunities in public school. You can't say that the working poor, people who work more than 40 hours a week but still fall below the poverty line, and a retired person with a pension and benefits have the same opportunity and access to quality medical care. Generosity is about the equality of opportunity. Opportunity to give and to receive. Opportunity to share Christ and to be moved by how Christ is at work in another's life. I want to tell you one more story. It's about a girl named Tess. Tess was a precocious 8-year-old little girl, and one day she heard her mom and dad talking in a serious and very somber tone about her little brother Andrew. Tess didn't understand everything that they were saying, but she got the gist. Her little brother Andrew was very, very sick, and they were completely out of money. They would have to move out of their house and move into a small apartment because mom and dad didn't have enough money for the doctor bills and the house payment. On top of that, only a very expensive surgery could save Andrew now, and they could not find anyone to lend them the money. Just then, Tess heard her dad say to her tearful mother in whispered desperation, "Only a miracle can save Andrew now." Hearing this, Tess ran to her room. She pulled out a glass jelly jar from its hiding place in her closet, and she poured all the change out onto the floor, and she counted it carefully. Then she put the change back in the jar, put the jar under her arm, slipped out the back door, and ran down to the drugstore 6 blocks away. The pharmacist was talking to a man very intently, and at first didn't notice Tess standing there. She waited patiently for a while and then dramatically cleared her throat, but still no luck. So finally, she got her attention by taking a coin out of the jar and tapping it on the glass. The pharmacist noticed her and said, "Just a minute, I'm talking to my brother from Chicago, whom I haven't seen in ages." "Well," said Tess, "I want to talk to you about my brother. He's really, really sick, and I want to buy a miracle. His name is Andrew, and he has something growing inside of his head, and my daddy says only a miracle can save him now, so how much does a miracle cost? I have the money here to pay for it. If it's enough, I'll get the rest. If it's not enough, just tell me how much a miracle costs." Well, the pharmacist's brother was a very well-dressed man, and he stooped down and asked Tess, "What kind of miracle does your brother need?" "I don't know," Tess replied with her eyes welling up. "I just know he's really sick. And Mommy says he needs an operation, but my parents can't pay for it, so I want to use my money." "How much do you have?" he asked. $1.11, Tess said proudly. "It's all the money I have in the world, but I can get some more if I need to." "Well, you're in luck," the man said with a smile. $1.11 is the exact price of a miracle for little brothers. He took the money in one hand and with the other told her, "Let's go to your house. I want to meet your brother and your parents. Let's see if I have the kind of miracle you need." Well, that well-dressed man just happened to be a doctor from Chicago and a noted neurosurgeon. The operation went successfully, completed without charge, and it wasn't long until Andrew was home again and doing well, and Tess's mom and dad were so grateful that talking one night about the chain of events that had saved Andrew's life, that surgery, her mom said, was a real miracle. And then she said, "I just wonder how much it would have cost." Tess smiled because she knew exactly how much it cost. $1.11. Plus the skill and graciousness of a doctor, and of course the gracious sacrificial love of an 8-year-old big sister. Someone might say, "Well, it's only $1.11, but it was all she had. She gave all she had to save her little brother. And that's an extravagant gift. That is being generous." It's a powerful story because it reminds us in a dramatic way that the Spirit of Christ can empower and enable us to be extravagant in our generosity, to be extravagant in our gratitude, to be extravagant in our graciousness. Just like the wolf of good, just like the widow who gave her all, just like the churches in Macedonia, just like Tess, we can make the choice to be generous, to give because we can, but also because we desire to give above and beyond, to give our time, our talents, our blessings, our financial gifts, and more, to give because Christ gave his all for us. We can choose, and I pray that we do choose, to be a Christ-centered community, all ways and at all times. To be a consoling community, a forgiving community, a mission-minded community, a faithful community, a reconciling community, and a very generous community. Amen.